with the upcoming release of the Wolverine and the current production of X-Men Days of Future Past, I thought I'd go back and backtrack on all the X-Men films from the best and the worst. Now, I'm a big X-Men fan. I've loved X-Men from a very young age. I've never read the comics, so I'm more of a movie goer, and I know the movies are meant to be, that they're not anywhere near, you know, the comics at all, and, you know, I can appreciate like how people want it to be like the comics, but at the same time it doesn't bother me because I never read the comics. I'm not a comic fan really. I like films, and I'm just gonna judge this franchise as a whole, not basing it from any, you know, comics. So yeah, now I'm going to be going through these films in order of release instead of chronological order, it'd just be easier. So I'm going to start straight away with the first X-Men film, X-Men. X-Men for me was something just completely new. Like, it was a new kind of like line of superhero films. Like, I just like the idea of, you know, it sort of humanised superheroes. You know, you get Superman who's all like, oh yeah, I'm wonderful, ooh yeah, everything's so easy for me. But this kind of showed these sort of, you know, ordinary people who just want ordinary lives, just want to, you know, live a normal life, have a normal family, you know, thrust into this sort of world where, you know, they're mutated and they have these powers and they're cast out by the world. And it makes it, and it's sort of a very real concept. You know, you think if that was really happening, people would be, you know, freaking out. And that's what I always loved about it. I loved that sort of realism it brings to, you know, cinema. X-Men 1 is easily one of my favourite ones. In that, you know, one, just straight away, that scene to begin with where Magneto, it's a flashback scene where Magneto is you know, reaching out to his mother and the gates pull apart. I remember thinking, wow, that is so cool, and it's got some great actors in. Hugh Jackman, this is the first film I ever saw him in, and I've been hooked to him. He's one of my favourite actors now because of the X-Men franchise, and I think he was great as Wolverine. He looks the part. What else? Patrick Stewart, I thought was great. You may know him from Star Trek Next Generation. He's great in that, and he's brilliant as Professor X. And Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf, he's also one of my favourite actors. I think he's brilliant in every film he's been in, and he was perfect as Magneto. And it's great seeing him play a villain, because in Lord of the Rings and, you know, The Hobbit, you see him as the, you know, the hero, when you can just switch between the two. And he's a brilliant actor, and, you know, I think he was one of my favourite cinema villains. One thing I didn't like about X-Men 1 is Rogue, and that goes for the whole franchise. Rogue as a character really annoys me, like how she screams all the time, and even as a kid I used to think, oh, shut up, you know. But, you know, other than that, it's just a little thing. I think the first film is brilliant, but the story's not as, like, you know, strong as it, you know, as the others. This one's sort of like, you know, how things begin, how you get to meet everyone, and, you know, introduce the characters for the first time. And for its time, this is very good. And what I like is Bryan Singer's not tried to make it like the comics. He actually said, you know, on set, comics weren't allowed on set at all, so people could, you know, people should get what they want from the characters just purely from the script. And in some ways that should be appreciated, because he's taken it and made it his own thing. And you can take that as you will. You know, some people won't really like that, but I can really appreciate that. And next up we have X-Men 2, or X2. I don't really know which one it is. X-Men 2 is probably my favourite of the franchise, second favourite probably, but this one's great. I love, you know, how these sort of the two teams, the X-Men and Magneto's, you know, group, have to team up to fight an even, you know, worse evil. And I think that's a really cool, like, thing. I always love it when, you know, the bad guy and the good guy have to come together to destroy like an even greater evil, which is just like, you know, a really great thing, seeing Magneto and Wolverine together, or, you know, something like that. And I really enjoyed it, and I loved seeing you got like an idea of Wolverine's backstory. You don't know who this bad guy is, Riker I think he's called, who is sort of like the person who created Wolverine, but at this point we don't know who he is. And that's what that sort of, I always say this, the sort of not knowing is the thing that makes it even more suspenseful. Like in horror films, I rather not see the monster at all, that you never get to see it, and that's the sort of thing that makes it so much scary, because there's nothing more scary than the suspense, the build up, and that sort of goes with the X-Men films. You've got like, you know, you're thinking, who the hell is this? And it makes you wonder more. And the beauty is you never really get to find, well, you do eventually, but I'll talk about that later. But overall I thought this was great. I thought this was a great film, and the very opening scene, you have Nightcrawler breaking into the White House, taking out these guards and teleporting, and it's just this amazing scene, probably one of the best scenes I've ever seen in cinema, and it's really great to, you know, to see come to life. And next we have X-Men 3: The Last Stand, which is, critically, it's not the best one. Like, I personally didn't mind it, but I realised there was a lot of stuff wrong with it, and the actors have sort of, like, you know, acknowledged there was bad stuff about it. The thing, Bryan Singer stepped out to do Superman Returns, which is dumb because Superman Returns is shit. But that, and you know, letting it go to someone else, it sort of messed things up. And this was sort of the start of the, you know, of the where the franchise dropped. Personally, I thought it was not bad. I didn't think it's the best one, but I think it's still pretty good. I think a lot of stuff is going on, so you know, there's a lot of characters involved, and they could have balanced it out a bit more. And you know, sometimes there's so much going on, it becomes overwhelming, and it sort of, you know, loosens the plot, and it's not as good. I think as a whole, this film is okay. It's not the best. It's sort of, you know, it should have ended here probably, but you know what Sony's like with sequels. But you know, really, it wasn't terrible, but it's not the best. And you know, you still have a good time. There's some good action scenes, but it's really not the best. And now we have X-Men Origins of Wolverine, which is a prequel to the X-Men franchise. It's sort of like a prequel to the first film. It's about how Wolverine became Wolverine, and it's sort of, it wasn't needed. Like, this was never in the plan for, say, Bryan Singer's franchise, but it was sort of just like, oh, people love Wolverine, let's make a film about Wolverine. And like, overall this film is pretty dumb. Like, it starts out good and it starts to, you know, simmer out near the end. The start of it I really enjoyed, like I loved seeing it, and to be honest, Will.i.am, who plays in it, really isn't that bad. Like, when they said Will.i.am was going to be in it, I thought, right, well, this is going to suck. And the film did kind of suck, but Will.i.am wasn't the problem. I thought it was alright, and I think a lot of people didn't like this because it didn't stick to any sort of, you know, comic book or anything. And the downside was there was a lot of stuff that didn't add up. You know, like there was just like timeline problems and bad CGI. Like, I think you know, they must have handed it over to another CGI department, because this one really was nothing special. There's one scene when Wolverine, his claws come out the first time, and it's adamantium, and he's having a look at them, and they look like something out of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, it just doesn't look right. And even in the first one, I think the adamantium claws had such better, you know, look. And maybe that was even because I don't think they did CGI with that, which, you know, CGI claws isn't needed. If they pulled it off in the first film, you know, it looks good. But overall, this film is not the best, but it has some really fun action scenes, which, you know, give or take, you'll either really love it or really hate it. But for me, I was just sort of, yeah, alright, it's alright, it's a fun time. I'm not someone who's really big into comics, so I was not really mad about it. But overall, this film is just, you know, okay. It's really nothing special. And last we have X-Men First Class, which is possibly one of my favourites, and like, there's so much wrong with this film, but I still really love it. Like, so many stuff they did in this film just didn't add up to the other franchise. Like, there's facts they say that, you know, isn't true. Like, there's, like, for an example, one of the main ones, the biggest one, right at the end, Professor X gets shot in the back, in the spinal cord, by a bullet and can't walk anymore, and he's in a wheelchair. And then, but you see in flashbacks, say in X-Men 3, there's a flashback to about, you know, 10 years ago, where Patrick Stewart is Professor X, and he's walking into Jean Grey's house, and he's in X-Men Origins of Wolverine. He gets off the helicopter and greets everyone, and tells them to get on the helicopter, and he's walking. It just doesn't add up, and it's sort of dumb, and it's, you know, that's something that's really against it. And, you know, there's so much wrong with the factual part of this film, but really overall I really enjoyed this film. I really loved seeing Professor X and Magneto, how they're sort of friendship slash, you know, hatred sort of grew, and you always, throughout the X-Men films, you see that they were friends, and it's cool to just see, you know, where they came from. I think James McAvoy, who was in Shameless, I loved him in that. I thought he was brilliant in this as Professor X. Like, I would think of no one else would be, he was perfect for the role. And I love the idea of Raven, Mystique, sort of like was friends with Professor X, like sort of like, you know, brother and sister, which I know was in no kind of comic or lore or anything like that, but I think that worked. I think it was pretty cool, and I think Jennifer Lawrence is really good as Mystique. I think she's a brilliant actress. Overall, this film had so many flaws, but at the same time, it's probably one of my favourite ones. Like that one and X-Men 2. But Bryan Singer is returning for X-Men Days of Future Past, which is a sign that he probably will, you know, do a good job. I think he's trying to do like a time travel kind of movie to sort of fix the problems with it. So I have faith in him. He did X-Men 1 and 2, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But what do you think? Are you looking forward to X-Men Days of Future Past and the Wolverine? Do you think it'll be good? Do you think it will suck? Leave comments below. I'm Adam, and I'll see you next time.